So guys, we are on, I think, day 1991 of the strike, and where the writers started their strike on the 2nd of May, and now we're getting some more interesting updates with how this is rippling throughout the industry. So we're going to go over that and also some updates to the strike in general, what's being said, what's going on with SAG-AFTRA at the moment, because there's a new story that popped up that I definitely want to cover. I also have some other tidbits that I haven't got to yet over the past couple of days. One involving Zachary Levi, in where he went on a podcast and spoke about Shazam, and a lot of people have got a lot to say about that. We also have some updates on what would have maybe have been a Bane movie once upon a time. So anyway, guys, let's get into today's news discussion. If you go on to enjoy this video, I'd really appreciate a like, consider subscribing. But right at the beginning of this video, as you can see from the Hollywood Reporter here, the headline is Spider-Verse, Kraven the Hunter delayed as first major theatrical dominoes fall amid strikes. Now, we've all been anticipating various projects getting delayed. We've already heard about some. We know that the longer the strike goes on, the more of a lag effect we're going to have come around 2025. Even if things do get resolved like everybody wants with the right resolution, things will still be impacted to quite an extent. There is a bit of an ebb and flow with like the negotiation or the lack of negotiations. There is a bit of a chess game that the studios are playing in, to be honest, the most diabolical ways, as you know, what we've heard before through certain high execs saying that they want people to not be able to afford food, rent, and mortgage payments and stuff. But I digress. Let's get into the main updates, the latest updates of this strike. So I want to take one part out of this article, and where they're saying Sony is the first major Hollywood studio to blink and make wholesale changes to its calendar since the SAG-AFTRA strike commenced July 14th. This doesn't include smaller specialty films that have moved as a result of the dual writers and actors strike. Sony's announcement confirms cinema owners' worst fears that the calendar for both this year and next year will see major disruptions. Now, other studios are still in a wait-and-see mode in terms of their big fall and winter tentpoles, but there's no telling how quickly that could change now that Sony has rearranged its schedule. The move could be seen as a sign that the unrest gripping Hollywood is not expected to have a resolution soon. And what they're talking about there is, obviously, Sony's been the first one to delay like Kraven again from October to August, so like this time next year, which is nuts. And other studios, like you may have heard with regards to Dune Part 2, that's meant to be releasing November, but hey, could be releasing next year. Now, what we've got so far, thanks to Discussing Film here, is a list of comic book movies now releasing in 2024. And what's fascinating about this is that we've got almost like too many Marvel films. Like, and I don't mean that in a bad way. If you're a diehard fan, you might be like, oh, that's amazing. But my larger commentary and point there is, and granted, yes, some of these are Sony Marvel, like Venom 3 and obviously Kraven the Hunter, but then you've got like Thunderbolts, Captain America 4, granted, still, some of these might be delayed and the release dates might be shuffled. But my point being, if people didn't and can't, there's a bit of a conversation right now with how much money people want to spend on the cinema. You know, you could say, oh yeah, but that's just The Flash. Nobody wanted to see The Flash anyway. But what about Indiana Jones and other movies like that? There's been a lot of contenders at the box office. Now, I do admit Barbie, incredible box office, like it's on well past 700 million right now. Or to give you another idea, it made more money in the box office in its first 5 or 6 days than The Flash and Shazam Fury of the Gods made collectively in its entire box office run. So people are going. But, you know, talking about all of this repetition or these, it's not just one thing. It's like sprinkle a few ingredients into this movie casserole pot here. Some people like to call it superhero fatigue. I don't think that's necessarily a thing. But add all of that and the other aspects of what we have talked about and what we could talk about with regards to, are you going to spend $15 on another movie ticket next year? But are you going to spend it for Madame Web? Are you also going to see Deadpool 3? You probably will. Venom 3, Captain America 4, Kraven the Hunter, Thunderbolts, and Joker 2. That's the thing. There's a lot of movies coming out next year. Now, the good thing for DC, what I will say, is that they, after Aquaman 2, are taking a, they're going on the sub bench for a little bit. I think some people are arguing they need more time, and I kind of agree. with regards to the brand somewhat damaged. That's, you know, another conversation we can have. But I think we can all agree there is something in some fans' minds when they think of DC films as of late, even probably if you're a general moviegoer, to the point of where it would be beneficial if they had a bit of time off from movie releases. And they've kind of got that. You know, after December, if Aquaman isn't delayed, and I've got a feeling, by the way, on that front, very quickly, that they might, despite maybe delaying Dune Part 2 to next year, just like how Kraven's now been delayed from October to bloody August next year, I do think that Aquaman, just like Blue Beetle, where it's been said that Warner Brothers considered delaying Blue Beetle, but they're like, nah, screw it, kind of, let's get it out the way. We know that The Flash didn't earn money. We know that this didn't earn money. Our remaining DCEU movies might not earn much money, so they might not delay Aquaman, just if you wanted to know my thoughts on that. They could, but I think they should just get it out the way. But back to what I was saying, after Aquaman 2, the only other comic book movie we have for DC is an Elseworlds movie. And the first one made over $1 billion, Joker, and that is Joker 2 Folie à Deux. Now, you can tell me all day, all night, you know, oh, I don't want to see a musically kind of version of Joker with Lady Gaga in it. I personally do. I think a lot of people will be won over when the trailers start or the promos start coming out. But it's good that the only movie you're getting is Joker with regards to DC. Like, you've got mostly a year off. There's no cinematic universe movie. And then the next project, unless you include Creature Commandos, actually, and maybe Waller, is Superman Legacy. So that will be the first proper unveiling the curtain of the new universe. And maybe that will be not maybe enough time. I'd love to know your guys' thoughts on that. Do you think it's enough time with DC just having Joker and maybe a couple more projects in 2025 leading up to Superman Legacy? Whereas on the Marvel side of things, you know, Sony and Disney, you've got Thunderbolts, Kraven, Captain America 4, Venom, Deadpool, Madame Web. It just keeps going on. But yeah, with regards to the main point of that initial article, other movies from other studios now may fall in line because they're like, oh, Sony's done it with Kraven. Maybe we can. Maybe we will follow suit and delay Dune Part 2. Like, Warner Brothers may make that decision. But this isn't the end of it, guys. Like, I know we went on quite a bit of a big ramble with movie releases there. There are other shenanigans going on, and here we have an article from Variety where they say, force majeure terminations for first look overall deals at struck companies coming as early as August 1st. So what this article is about and what is essentially happening here, in where what they want to do, as per the first paragraph here, major Hollywood studios and streaming platforms are considering terminating some of their first look and overall deals with writers as soon as August 1st. The deals would be torn up under contractual force majeure classes as SAG-AFTRA and the Writers Guild of America continue to strike. So essentially, if anyone's got like an overall deal or first look deal with a major studio, what they're threatening to do is just be like, yeah, you're striking. We're like tearing up any kind of thing we had going. As the article goes on to say here, the writer's strike is also rapidly approaching the 90-day mark when historically deal makers have the option to kill agreements in the face of an act of God, like the common show business interpretation for how the phrase force majeure applies to these types of labor shutdowns. David Goodman echoed this in an interview with Variety this week. They have a legal problem unless you're going to force majeure all the deals, he said. He argued that an act of God cannot be invoked selectively and that studios are unlikely to wipe out all their deals because that means they might lose some creators to their rivals when the strike is over. As you can see, the studios are still being the studios, and they're like playing around with the idea of even more things. But having said that, there has been an update today that reps for studios and streamers have reportedly expressed a desire to return to negotiations with SAG-AFTRA in a meeting on Friday. Now, this is after they refused to return to negotiations with SAG about a week or so ago. Now, this is from Puck News. I can't really show the article because it's one of those subscription service ones, but I've read it myself. And essentially, the gist of it is that it seems that given the SAG-AFTRA interim agreements that they've been issuing, which I think they've issued out more than 100 of these interim agreements now, those allow productions both big and small for non-struck companies, it's important to remember that, non-struck companies to continue to shoot, given that they've agreed with the union's most recent terms and demands, which allow for more wages and residuals for the cast. And now since that is happening, you have the other Hollywood CEOs and execs of the AMPTP entertaining going back to the table, because since obviously their studios are being striked against and they can't shoot projects, they don't really like, they're seeing this happen and they don't really like the competitive edge that these other studios have. Like, I believe A24 is still shooting right now. They've agreed to, the union's terms and conditions, and it's kind of like, well, studios, if you did the bloody same thing, then, this will kind of be over. But, that's the same old story, isn't it? So long story short, the big cheeses at the struck companies are like, well, maybe we will talk about it now, but there's no mention of the WGA here. This is just in this article mentioning SAG-AFTRA. And again, it is kind of funny seeing them be like, oh, but they're getting agreements. This is annoying us. All we can do is really come to the table and negotiate and maybe give you what you want so we can start doing what these other non-struck companies are doing with shooting projects. Yeah, so like, obviously, nothing to do with really the WGA, but what can be seen, I suppose, out of this is that if SAG-AFTRA do strike a deal, then perhaps it could give the WGA something to work with. But another way to look at this is that they're obviously more concerned about making a deal with SAG-AFTRA to maybe get back into the position they were in before, which is what I've spoken about before with how the writer's strike was ongoing, but certain movies and shows were still filming because their scripts were completed. For example, Deadpool 3. Ryan Reynolds couldn't improvise, but they were still shooting as per the script. Same with Sandman on Netflix. So if they get that back, then they can still shoot, and that's what they want to do. And that's what is worrying, because they could still neglect the writers after that. But again, I can't imagine that SAG-AFTRA would really want to give in so easily without having some assurances, because they are standing in solidarity with the WGA. So we're going to have to wait and see how this unfolds, but this is a development nonetheless. So everyone, for the last tidbits of the news roundup here, we have a story recently with regards to Zachary Levi and how he has no idea if he's returning as Shazam in the DCU. He says, I don't know what the future holds because Fury of the Gods was not well received. I have no idea where we go from here. And I think that sounds very familiar to a lot of you in terms of how with Shazam 2, Fury of the Gods, I think it cost around $125 million, with an estimated $100 million on top of that with marketing the movie. So that's, let's just say, around $220 to $225 million to actually put Shazam out there. And then it only made $133.6 million in the box office. And you guys know what I say about ticket sales and how much of that goes to the cinemas. They lost a lot of money on this movie. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that Zachary Levi still wouldn't pop up in the DCU. And I know some of you may say, oh, Bobby, you're crazy for that. It could be the same situation with Blue Beetle. If Blue Beetle really doesn't do well, James Gunn is pretty interested, I think, in giving these two characters another go in the DCU. I would say Blue Beetle is far more likely than Shazam, because we've also had Zachary Levi say he's been doing Shazam now for 6 years, and he's kind of done with superhero things for the foreseeable future. And yeah, I think maybe he's just a bit fatigued by it, because he also said some of these other comments. The audience score is still quite good, but the critic score was very oddly and perplexingly low, and people were insanely unkind. I've been a part of things, and as much as I wish they were good, I know they're okay. I know that they miss a lot, and I'm not saying Shazam Fury of the Gods is some perfect Orson Welles-like masterpiece, but it's a good darn movie. Now, what I would say about that is, I do think that it should have done better. I agree with him in saying I don't think it's some perfect masterpiece, like, not at all. But I do think, I'm not saying it was necessarily on the level of the first movie. I do prefer the sequel in some ways, but the first movie kind of honed in on the heart a little bit more. And there's a lot of other kind of criticisms that you can have. Again, it's not the most perfect movie, but I definitely think it should have done better than $133.6 million. I don't think it was a good darn movie. I think it was a fun kind of popcorn movie. That is somewhat of what I've said recently, a one-time watch. Would you watch it again and again, like, within the span of even a year? No, not really. But in conclusion, I do think that Zachary Levi is kind of good friends with James Gunn and Peter Safran, and maybe I wouldn't ever, like, never, my rule here is never say never with him just popping up. like in some kind of, like, this is like a 10-year plan, so I can imagine him putting on the suit again in the next 4 to 6 years or something, and then he pops up. But I think Sholomar Duenia, his chances are like way, way, way higher, no matter how Blue Beetle does. Like, don't get me wrong, if Blue Beetle made $1 million, like, that's it, then that's another conversation. But I think they're going to be more forgiving. And I think, as I've discussed in my live streams recently, James Gunn and Peter Safran are fully aware that regardless, I don't think it's regardless of the quality, because obviously that comes into play with word of mouth in terms of if you want to even go see a movie. But I think they expect these last DCEU movies, including Aquaman 2, to not get a lot of attention. Like, people, if they know it's good or not, might not even show up to it. Like, that's just how it is. So I think they're going to give Sholomar Duenia's Blue Beetle a chance to pop up and boost the gold or something like that, even if the movie doesn't do as well as they kind of want it to. And somewhat speaking of Blue Beetle, it turns out that the director, Angel Manuel Soto, initially wanted to shoot a very different movie. So this comes from Den of Geek, who did an interview with him. And they say when Angel Manuel Soto got the call from Warner Brothers about directing a DC movie, his mind was miles away from Blue Beetle. I wanted to pitch ideas, and one of them was the Bane origin story. I always thought that there was something interesting in exploring his reality and how a character like that comes to be. He quickly found out, though, that the conversation was not about that. Instead, the studio had a more youthful and heroic figure in mind, telling Soto, there's this character that we've been developing for a couple of years, the Blue Beetle, a Latino superhero. So this is fascinating to me just because, A, it's kind of cool. I mean, it's not like the biggest news in the world. Like, he had a meeting, he wanted to pitch some ideas, he went in there, like, and would have come out very, very happy if he was allowed to do a Bane origin movie. And that would have been super, super cool, obviously, because if they were doing a Bane origin movie, we would have been going like knee-deep into Peña Duro, all of the trials and tribulations that Bane went through. And what's kind of going through my mind is when this meeting would have happened. Obviously, it would have happened before they started production on Blue Beetle. So would this have been a pitch for the DCEU? I don't necessarily think so. My idea is that maybe after seeing Joker, and from what we heard a long time ago, like maybe the Todd Phillips Joker movie was meant to start this whole DC Black label, but it never really became a thing. Like, Elseworlds movies aren't off the table. Clearly, like the Batman, we've got Matt Reeves's, even though they're not canonically linked. But we can still have, like, Elseworlds movies. It's just that once upon a time, there may have been like a big push to make an effort of Black label level actual movies, even if each one isn't connected. So I think maybe after seeing Joker and knowing that DC, even despite having a cinematic universe, was still interested in doing Elseworlds movies, man, he thought, how about one just dedicated to Bane? I would hazard a guess that that's what he wanted to do, and that would have been really, really, really cool. But obviously the studio kind of had something else in mind. They were like, actually, like, maybe we'll put that on the shelf, but like Blue Beetle, we would love you to do Blue Beetle. So cool little tidbit there, and now it's got me thinking about what, some of you may not dig it. I kind of may understand why, but either way, like, you know, you could say the same thing about Joker, like, why maybe do a Joker movie? It's like, why do a Bane origin movie? I think you can do it, and I think, again, that was the whole grand idea about the Black Label. Maybe different DC characters, different kind of origins, and mainly character studies, right, in the same vein. Not necessarily the formulaic superhero repetition kind of thing that we've got today in cinematic universes, but the Joker approach, not obviously the same thing, but like the approach to quality there about the character. Imagine a character study of Peña Duro with Bane there and what he goes through to like perform that character. As Angel says here, I always thought there was something interesting in exploring his reality and how a character like that comes to be. Well, we would have seen that hardship. So let me know if you think it would have been like a DCEU movie, or if you're kind of with me and you thought maybe he went in to pitch it as like an Elseworlds movie. So let me know your thoughts on absolutely everything, from all the little kind of micro updates on the SAG-AFTRA and writers' strike. What about the movie delays, the amount of Marvel movies in the 2024 release calendar? So like this video if you did enjoy it. You guys know I deeply appreciate that. But I'm going to love you and leave you. So ultimately, just thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day. And I'll see you people of the DCU in the next video. Goodbye.